when we talk about the crisis communication plan, the elements of it, you know, it's not a one size fits all, that's for sure. You know, Kate has worked hard and has what sounds like a reasonable mayor to deal with. So every situation is different, but there are commonalities, and you know, we can take a look at those, but yeah, I mean, preparation is the way to go, period. You'll hear that a ton today. The first thing, and Celeste just mentioned it, is like having a communication chain. Who needs the information and when do they need it? And you always start at home, right? So who's your chain of command? Who are the folks you answer to? You know, having worked in government as you guys do, you know, you're aware that no one likes to be caught off guard, right? The mayor does not want to read about something or get a phone call about an issue that's been percolating that he hasn't been made aware of. So that's really huge. Making sure that you have some statements in sort of in the can that have already been approved by anyone who needs to approve them. And using Kate's some of, you know, what she's already put together, and also the messaging that we're going to show you in a minute in the fact sheets that we put together with Celeste in June. Like that's, you know, that is the stuff that once you have it, then you're tweaking it a little bit based on the crisis, but fundamentally what you need is there. And then media outlets. So I know that for some of you, you have, you know, one reporter covering everything in the community. You've got, like, you know, small outlets, or maybe they're, you know, you're sharing it with multiple communities. But to the extent that you can, when a crisis hits, what you don't want to be doing is spending all your time pulling together, like, how am I reaching this outlet? Or what about that outlet? And since a lot of reporters are working from home, it's like you have to work extra hard to get their contact information. So that's something that, you know, you could put together now. Let me just get maybe a show of hands now, just to see how many of you have put together a quasi communications plan / crisis communications plan, or anything that looks even remotely like a plan. Have you already started tackling that? Yeah, so that's great. It looks like many of you have already got one, or you've already started it. You know, one of the things that we would offer is that if you, you know, as we're going through this process today, as we're doing, you know, giving you suggestions on what should go into your plan, if you have questions or if you want to push back on anything, you know, use the chat. Erin's going to collect everything, and at the break we're going to discuss what came up, and if there's something that we're not planning on addressing, then I'll make sure that we address it. It's one way or the other, we'll figure a way to get your questions answered today, but I'm really pleased to see that you've already thought about what's going to, you know, what you're going to be facing. So there are things you can lean on in a crisis. The first thing are your materials, okay? Core messages, which are, you know, we're going to get into in a minute, but that's basically how you're framing the issue for everyone, and that's how you're setting the narrative. That's when Celeste was saying, like, that first out of the gate, those words, how you're describing the situation, that you can nail down now, okay? Media statements that can be tailored and quickly released. So what I love about media statements, and they're, you know, they take the questioning, they take the variables out of an interview, okay? And the variables are, how disciplined is your spokesperson in the face of, you know, insistent questioning, either from the public or a reporter. And, you know, do you communicate exactly what you need to communicate in that moment? A media statement is like, here it is in black and white. We email it to the reporter or to, you know, who's ever asking for it. And so, you know, you're going to tweak them a little bit based on the circumstance, but having a few in the can to address the challenges or protests or whatever's happening, like that's money in the bank, really. Makes your life so easy. A fact sheet, and that's basically, the fact sheet is to make your life easier and the reporter's life easier, or the mayor's life easier. It just, it captures what the issue is about. And you can have multiple fact sheets, but, you know, having one, if you can keep it like super tight, having one that just sort of lists the core messages, and provide some resources for follow-up with questions, you know, that will go a long way, so that you're not scrambling when a crisis is in play. And then a Q&A for internal use. I'll tell you what I like about that. That is like, and we're going to do an exercise in a little bit, but it's basically like, okay, what are those questions, the scary questions, the you know, the challenging questions, the questions that I really don't want to answer, what are they? And then how are we going to answer those using a core message? So let's talk a little bit about core messages. Basically, you don't want too many. And the reason you don't want too many is because you want to narrow down what you're saying about an issue. You're going to keep it very tight. It's going to simplify complex information, and it's going to answer questions like, why do I care about this? Why, like, maybe I don't use the library all the time. Why do I care that people are challenging books? Well, this is why you're going to care. You know, this is why, even if you're not using the library all the time, this is a fundamental issue and a right that you have as a citizen to not have your access curtailed, type of thing, okay? And it provides framework. So your core messages, those 3 to 5 messages, which we're going to go over in a minute, those are to be communicated consistently on every platform. And the reason you're doing that is so that there's uniformity, and it makes people remember, because they're hearing it over and over again in different ways, like, oh, this is how the library feels about this issue. Could be in a mayor's speech, it could be on your website, it could be in a presentation, it could be part of a media interview. Any kind of discussion about, let's say, for example, a book challenge is answered in the same way across platforms. The biggest thing is it limits interpretation. You don't want people not being completely clear about how you feel about the current rash of book challenges, right? You don't want ambiguity. So having only 3 to 5 messages that frame that issue, that's how you get rid of ambiguity, okay? So I put together, in all of my years, and I've had a lot of them as a spokesperson, I put together categories for core messages that you can use or not. But what I found was every interview that I did, or that my client did, all questions could be answered in one of these, by one of these bullets here, okay? And so if you're thinking about, gee, how do I write a core message? And by the way, just spoiler alert, the MBLC has already done that for you. But let's say you have another issue you want to message out, okay? Every major issue should have its own set. And it could be on anything. And I would argue that, you know, the more sticky the issue, the more important it is to have a set of core messages, okay? So the first message you always want to have is to position your library, right? And the value, that's always first. And in a little bit, we're going to throw into the chat some good examples of spokespeople, and you'll see they lead with, you know, their organization and what it's doing for the community. And that's the beginning of you know, that like engagement, whether it's an interview or public meeting. Defines the specific issue. You know, what are we talking about today? Are we talking about intellectual freedom? Are we talking about that it's a parent's right or caregiver's right to determine what materials their child is exposed to, you know, be very specific. What data do you have to support that this is an issue? James gave us some data about that book challenges have increased, right? That's a data point. It could be anecdotal data that the library is dealing with more book challenges now than it ever has. That's a data point, even though, you know, data is a loose term. Just something that really puts it into context, frames the issue. Like, why are we talking about this type of thing? And then my favorite is outline the cost of not addressing the issue. And people are like, why do we do that? What do you mean? Because reporters follow the money. For those of you old enough to remember Watergate, you know, this is what reporters do. They follow the money. And, you know, having a talking point that pushes back and reframes that question. So the question isn't, you know, how much does it cost to, you know, provide books, you know, that are filled with pornography. The question is, let me explain why, you know, having books available is critical to our children's development type of thing. So it's not like, we're not talking specifically dollars. And because you guys are public entities, you are required to answer questions about money. For the most part, you know, it's all FOIAble, Freedom of Information Act. But what you want to do if you're engaged in a discussion or an interview is to say, we'll get you that information, but let me tell you why we think the real cost, you know, is to our children, because they're not going to have access to information or whatever you decide to say. So I'm hoping that all makes sense. And then maybe a call to action, right? And how the library is addressing the issue. So that's why our library is offering, you know, story time, and we have a robust children's section and blah, blah, blah. Call to action is more along the lines of, you know, a positive call to action, not like call your legislator, because you can't do that. But, you know, it's like we welcome people. Come to the library. Come check it out for yourself. Come see the expansive books that we have for our community. That sort of approach. So those are my suggestions. And we will now we can take a look at the messages that the MBLC has put together. They are, I believe we've got them in the chat at this point, and you can take a look at those. This is a terrific resource. You are not having to create this stuff out of whole cloth, but it takes a real, you know, a real clear look at things like intellectual freedom, censorship, you know, the fact that this is a national movement to ban books targeting LGBTQ+ and Black people, that it's connected to a political agenda. Libraries, you know, that the library has a mission and policies. And so it really captures how you want the world to think about these issues. And because you are working for a library, and that you are representing the library, even if you have personal opinions about some of this stuff, your role as a librarian, your role working for the library in any capacity is to promote the core values that the library has. And so these messages, I think, are some really good examples of core messaging, and certainly can be tweaked, but you know, I thought they were super useful and saving you tons of time not having to you know, not having to write them yourselves. I didn't know, Celeste or June, if you wanted to weigh in at all on these and how we put them together, but I just think they're a tremendous resource.
I mean, I will say this, thank you, Maria. And I will say this, the directors that we spoke to, I think, you know, Kate's obviously on here, Clayton, were super helpful in shaping this. And I think one of the most important messages is it's beyond book bans, right? Like this is an issue that goes beyond book challenges. And so that was one of the most, I think Juna would agree, the most important ones that we included. And then we heard a lot about, people accusing libraries of stacking the shelves with books that, the librarians themselves want, and so, just really attacking that head on. As Maria said, it's thinking about the questions you want to answer, but more importantly, the ones you hope you never have to answer. Those are the ones that you want to find messages for. And certainly if folks have, anything they want to share with me or June, you can always get in touch with us, anything they, need in that regard. But yeah, and I should mention that we did do a separate one for school libraries because the issues that they're facing are different. We worked closely with Jen Varney and Georgina Treb, and the way that we're framing that is, the way to ensure that the right book ends up with the right student is to have more school library teachers, not ban books. So that's available on the website too.
Great. Thank you, Celeste. So one of the really important tools, we mentioned it a little bit earlier, are fact sheets. And what I love about fact sheets is that, number one, you can do them in advance. And they, as you'll see in the chat, that fact sheet and the core messages, fact sheet, it's all one document. And, again, share that with your leadership. But also, if you get a call from a reporter or, you're giving, any kind of an interview, it really allows you a little breathing room. So like, here you go, here's the fact sheet. On it are core messages, so that they know how the issue is being, dealt with from your end. A link to any data points or articles. And it doesn't have to be data that you have produced, as long as it's, you're crediting the source and you can put the links right on it. The reason this is helpful is a reporter, specifically, I'm going to talk about media for a second. Reporter needs to collect information to write their story. And it's so much better if you can provide it to them, because they are swamped. They don't have the luxury of doing a ton of research. They're very, transactional, but because they have to be. But also, you want to point them to the data that you as the expert know to be the best data for them to look at. So you want to include that where you can. Any relevant articles. It's not so much that you're saying, look, other people have written about it, but it just gives them more context, okay? And then names and contact people, as spokespeople, if you are comfortable with that and if they are comfortable. But for example, you might say, look, I'm going to give you the name of a local business owner who feels very strongly about this issue and, is willing to speak on the record. And that because you've spent, X number of months now cultivating people, right, to be spokesperson. Who in your community would be a good representative, would be good in terms of representing the library in any kind of an interview. Anyway, fact sheets, fabulous tool. Keep them short. If you can get it all in one page, 2 pages, that would be ideal. Okay. So let's talk about public media statements. And, these are a tool that I think are probably in a crisis. I won't say the most important, but pretty much one of the most important tools that you can have. Okay. It eliminates the need for you to engage in an interview and potentially now, because you guys don't do this for a living, even for me, I do it for a living, it's really challenging to stay on message sometimes. And a media statement allows you to put how you feel out into the world, and there's no discussion about it. It's like, here you go. We're not going to engage in an interview, but we're going to send you a statement. And pretty much I've never had an outlet say, oh, we're not going to take that. If you're not going to give us an interview, forget it. They always take it. You want to make sure that it's not super long. Keep it short, because the more you give them, if it's too long, if it's more than a couple of sentences, you're giving them editing rights, basically, and they may take out stuff that you don't want them to take out. You want to use it proactively. You can either send it out right as a situation is unfolding, or you can, you know, like to say, you know, if it's a big enough issue, you know, if it's a safety issue, you can let people know what's going on, you know, proactively, or you can wait until a reporter says, hey, you know, I got a call from a community member who alerted us that XYZ book is on the shelves. What do you have to say about that? So you can use that in both ways. You want to make sure they got it. I had a situation once with a client where they wanted to send, I was sort of working behind the scenes, and they wanted to send the statement directly. And the reporter said, great, send it along. Here's my email. They sent it before deadline, but that something happened that was the wrong email, or something went down that wasn't great. They didn't get it. So they ended up not having their opportunity to be in that story because they, you know, that connection was not made. So what you need to do is follow up, make sure they have it. It seems like a small detail, but it's a lesson that you don't want to learn. It's, you know, just opportunity lost at that point. So before we break, I want to get into a little bit about social media, and you know, and I know this is a little bit of a tricky situation. You know, Kate had mentioned earlier that, you know, that's become a platform for a lot of hate directed towards the libraries, and sometimes personally towards you guys. And so that's very concerning. But there are certain things that you can do as an organization to really get ready for some of these things. The first thing, and I know you're already doing this because I've done some exploration, you know, you're building value by establishing a presence in the community on social media. So that's fantastic, because when you're in a crisis, you burn through a lot of capital. And if you have none in the bank, you get nothing to burn through. So making sure that people know what the library programs are, you know, as varied as they may be, making sure that you're doing things that proactively encourage people to think well of the library is a very nice foundation to work from. You want to make sure you know what the stomach is for social media engagement in your community, which I'm sure you all do. But for example, I've got a client who they have zero tolerance for social media engagement. They don't want to, you know, sometimes they get poked at. They don't want to address it. They don't want to see that as any kind of an opportunity. They just want to let it ride. And sometimes, you know, that's a strategy that works. I have, you know, another client who I work with who they see every opportunity in every negative comment, as long as it's on a community site. And that's the thing. You want to really sort of pick and choose where you engage and think about who your audience is. You know, it's not fringe groups. You're probably not going to change those folks' minds, but it's, you know, on platforms where your community lives. Those are what you want to focus on. I know you don't have unlimited resources and anyone in particular who can maybe focus on social media, but to the extent that you can, you want to just sort of review and monitor what's happening online. This is where your supporters can be helpful. If you've got folks who have said to you, yes, I'm very willing to speak on the record or weigh in with a post or whatever, you know, if you need to, those are the folks, you know, those are the opportunities that those folks can jump into. And obviously, again, you're defining the narrative, so you want to have it, you want to make sure it's with information that you want to have out there. It's very orchestrated. None of this stuff is off the cuff, okay? And then, of course, you want to make sure everyone in the library who works with you knows what the policy is and knows how to secure their own social media accounts. So I've had, I think Erin maybe has already put this into the chat, but the ALA's policy for social media, you know, let me just grab this one. The social media policy that guidelines that they have recommended, we've put in the chat. And, you know, that will give you a sense of what you might want to incorporate. But again, every organization, every community is different. So you've just got to sort of pick and choose what works for you. But it should be part of your library's communication plan. And public safety is where it all happens. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to worry about and think about, and privacy and obviously First Amendment issues, that type of thing. One of the things that I found useful in working on social media policies is that you have to engage, you know, your legal folks. You have to engage your, you know, I would think you'd have to engage, you know, whether it's the mayor's office, board of selectmen, whomever. Just the process of working on putting that policy together and why you're putting the policy together creates buy-in. It would be very hard to hear about, and certainly, you know, Kate had mentioned a little bit about, you know, some of the attacks that she's dealing with in her own community online. You know, just having to deal with that personally is a challenge. And we have an article, and actually, I'm sorry, this probably has already come up, but UC Berkeley has done a really nice piece on doxing. And doxing, for those of you who may or may not be aware, is it's like publicly identifying or publishing private information about someone as a form of punishment or revenge. And so take a look at that article when you can. It gives very specific guidelines as to how your employees can protect themselves on their own sites. But it's not a bad idea to incorporate it into your social media policy. Just, what are some of the things that an employee can do, or what can your organization do? What kind of safety steps might be taken to protect everyone should you have somebody who's attacking you online? Okay. So, as I mentioned earlier, your organization's tolerance for this stuff, as well as specific, the specific situation, will really dictate the strategy that you take. Your audience is always going to be the folks who use the library. It's going to be community stakeholders. It's going to be, your government leaders, and you want to speak to them. Basically, don't focus your energy on the people who are hating on you, because they're the minority. Although they might have a pretty big, microphone, so to speak, so do you, and you guys have cachet in the community that they don't have, and you need to harness that in these situations. Obviously you want to speak directly to your community, and you're using your core messages to do that and giving them the information that they need, especially during a crisis. What does that look like? Does that mean that, if there's a protest on site, for example, and it's a big crowd and things are starting to look a little bit, concerning, and maybe the police have advised you that they don't want anyone else coming into the library building, maybe you're posting that online, but you're posting it in a context that serves you, right? So it's that, in an effort to protect the people in our community, we're closing early today, or we are, and on the advice of the police department, we are asking folks not to come to the library this afternoon, type of thing, whatever that might look like. So social media is, a great tool for that.